So the next part we'll be taking a look at is the seed bank. The entire seed bank section is really straightforward, starting of course with a toggle for the seed bank. You'll pretty much always want to have this enabled unless you are making a conveyor belt level, in which case you want to have it disabled. I'll show that in a moment, but for now, just remember that this has to be enabled all the time, for the most part. Down here, we have the number of seed slots that you can have. You can set this from a minimum of 1 to a maximum of 8. This will override whatever amount of seed slots the player currently has. So if you want to give them no upgrades but set their seed slots to the maximum, you can set this to 8, and that'll give them all of the seed slots to work with. And you can even set this to a higher value than 8, so that they can pick more plants. But keep in mind that in a normal setting, the player is only able to use 9 plants, because visually you can only see up to the 9th seed packet area, and anything below that is just completely unusable for the player. So the maximum is going to be 9, but in regular levels, obviously only use 8. This part right here is the seed bank type. There are 2 types of seed bank. The chooser, which just lets you pick whatever plants you have available to you. And if you click on this, it'll become preset. And as you can see, it'll also change the chart down here. Let's cover the chooser side first. The seed bank type chooser will let you pre-pick plants if you want. And you'll have these little squares here where you can pick the plants that you want to add onto the player's selection. This is how you do the survive with most of your plants pre-picked for you objective. You just set up whichever plants you want the player to have pre-selected here, and these will be locked to their loadout doing this. Then we have the special seed bank. The special seed bank you might know as another objective that is in the game. It basically gives you a set amount of plants that you can pick from, while not letting you choose some others. What this does basically is that any plants that are put into these grids will be the only ones that the player can select. However, there is a very important distinction you need to do here. Obviously, you should definitely not be adding all of these one by one, like going like this. This will just absolutely kill you. Don't do this. Instead, you can see there's a little symbol down here that says add plants, and then there's a drop down, and then you can see all of the different plant categories that you can add. Say, for example, all of the element plants or poison plants. You can press on any of these settings, and then the chart will be updated with those plants in the first or second row as you go, like this. And as you can see, they'll all be added right here. Of course, you can also do all plants, for example, and that'll add all of the plants into one single grid space, like so. And as you can see, there they all are. Yeah, but that's basically how the special seed bank works. Down here, there's also an explanation of how the category works, in case you're confused. But yeah, this is how you do a special seed bank. In general, you probably won't be using this too much. The one that you will be using a lot is down here, banned plants. This works pretty much exactly the same as special seed bank. Any plants that are down here will not be able to be selected at all during the seed select. So like, let's say we put in kiwi bees and sunflower and grape buster. All of these plants will be grayed out during the seed select, and you won't be able to pick them. Just like the special seed bank section, there is a drop down menu here where you can select plants to ban, like for example sun producers. For last 10 level, you can just press that setting here, and then all of the sun producers that are in Reflourished will be added to the list here. Though, of course, keep in mind, since Elm, as of recording this episode, is not updated, there will be some plants that are not in this selection, such as Solar Pea, in which case you will need to add the codename manually for those plants. Now let's switch to the seed bank type to preset. This basically just gets rid of these two categories because in a preset level, you're only given the plans that you get during the level to work with. But it's very simple. You simply just set up whichever plans you want the player to use here, and that's it. And these plans will be given to the player automatically. Oh, sorry. There we go. You simply set them up like this, and then these plans will be given to the player. Worth noting, you want to have level objectives up here enabled, so you get the little message down here, the objective message of the, the objective, mostly just for detail's sake, so that the player isn't confused. But it's not really that necessary. I will just like your level more if you do enable level objectives, because it's good to have this little bit of information for the player so they don't get confused. So now we're gonna move on to this entire section down here. These are all special modules for specific level types, and the first one we'll be covering is the conveyor belt. So you need to enable it down here, and it'll tell you that the Seedbank is enabled. You need to disable it. Simply click up here, and then the Seedbank will be disabled. Disable Falling Sun as well. I already told you in the first episode how you can do this, but simply click here. Then it will be disabled, and then you won't have any issues in the conveyor belt level. We'll focus on this part first. We have conveyor speed, conveyor delay, for number of packets, and the conveyor settings down here. Starting with conveyor speed, this is simply how quickly the conveyor belt itself moves, both visually and how the seed packets move across the conveyor as you go. You usually want to leave this completely unchanged. It's mostly just a visual thing. Try not to set this to be too low, like 10. Otherwise, seed packets will come in way too slowly and the player will not be able to use them quickly enough. Conveyor delay is the most important value here. Conveyor delay basically acts as a timer in seconds of how long it takes for the seed packets to arrive one by one. In this case, the first seed packet will arrive after 4 seconds have passed, and then there will be a delay of 4 seconds, and so on and so forth. So this means that every 4 seconds, the player will get one seed packet in their conveyor belt. Down here, we have a full number of seed packets value. This sets up how many seed packets there need to be in the conveyor belt to affect the value, the two values that are up here, the conveyor speed and the conveyor delay. Let me write down an example. Let's say the conveyor belt will start out at a delay of 4 for 0 seed packets. Once the player accumulates, say, 3 seed packets in their conveyor belt, the conveyor delay will be made slower, in this case, 5 seconds instead. What if they accumulate 5 seed packets? Well, that's where the conveyor belt is going to reach a screeching halt and go to like a delay of 8 seconds, so that you can encourage the player to use their seed packets. These aren't required to set up. I mostly just use these two first values. More often than not, they're not really required. You can even set up a slow, much faster delay at first, and then increase it very, very quickly later on, like this. But just having one value like this, just these 3 values, that's completely fine. You can work with that. You can just set up the conveyor belt to give the seed packets however quickly you want, depending on the level that you have. Now, the conveyor settings. The conveyor settings is composed of all of these categories. Let's break it down one by one. First, plant. The plant is over here. You can ignore this little value here. It doesn't matter. This little corner here, this does not matter. This is what matters. The plant, in this case, can be any plant you want from Reflourished, and you can even add some tool items such as the bowling balls and power tiles. But you generally will just be sticking to plants. So in this case, let's set up, for example, strawberries, sunflower, and well, not sunflower. It's like a bear. Potato mine and squash, for example. You got your plants. It's very simple. You can set up any plants here. Now, the weight handles how often randomly should a plant appear. The higher the weight of a plant, the more likely it is to appear, and vice versa. If you give it a lower weight, it will appear less often. Let's say, for example, we want strawberries to be the main plant in this level that we have, which is a conveyor. So we're gonna give it a high weight of 100. Potato mine is going to be more of a support plant, so we're gonna give it a smaller weight of 85. Squash is pretty strong, so we're gonna give it a lower weight than potato mine, 75. What does this mean? Well, strawberries is going to appear more often than not. Potato mine is going to be in second place, appearing quite often, but not as often as, say, strawberries here. And squash will appear the least, but it will still have a high chance of appearing. The higher the gap between all of these numbers, the more or less likely something is to appear. For example, if I set up the numbers like this, strawberries is going to be much more likely to appear than something like squash, which has a very, very low chance of appearing. You want to really keep these values in mind. The weight is really important in how a conveyor plays. If you don't set up a weight, nothing's going to break, as it says up here. There won't be a specific weight and plants will just be given to you randomly. But I highly recommend you set up a weight if you're going to do a conveyor belt level, because if you let the player just game plants randomly, then there is a chance they will not be able to beat your level because they aren't able to get the necessary plants to beat the level quickly. Same goes with having really weird or scuffed weight levels. If a plant that isn't really that strong has a really high weight, while something that's really necessary to beat a level has a really low weight, then your player will get screwed over and they won't be able to get out their attackers quickly enough. Also, I'm using 100 here, but you can easily do something like 5 and then 3 and then 2 or something like that. You can use smaller values like this and it works completely fine. Just make sure you keep it consistent between all the plants in your level so that there's no issues when it comes to giving out plants in the conveyor belt. Alright, next we got max count. There's a note here as well. There was a note in the way here which explains everything I explained here. But the max count, as it says here, the threshold for number of plants on the conveyor and on the lawn. What does this mean? It means that it's basically the maximum amount of plants you can have at any given time. For example, strawberries. Let's say I don't want the player to have too many of these. Let's set a number 8 of max count to it so that the player only gets 8 of these on the board. Potato mine can probably be spammed a little bit more, so let's set it to 10. Squash, maybe 2. That means that the player can only have 8 strawberries, 10 potato mines, or 2 squashes at a given time. This also includes in the conveyor belt. The player can have 8 strawberries in the conveyor belt, for example, and they won't be able to receive any more. Same goes with, in this example, squash. The player can store 2 squashes in their conveyor belt and they cannot receive any more. Unless you use max count weight factor, which we'll get to in a moment here. But yeah, basically that's what it is. Simply put, this limits the amount of plants that you can have of any type of plant. Say if you want to give the player 3 Peter, but you don't want to give them too many of them, well, you can just set up a max count of like 10 or 12, and then that's going to be the total limit of plants that they will get during the level. Coincidentally, you can leave this blank, and there won't be any max count associated with the plant, so the player can have as many of them as they want. Moving on to the max count weight factor. It says here that when the max count is reached, the weight of the plant will be multiplied by this value. For example, 2. By default, if max count is used, this is set to 0. There is an issue here with max count and max count weight factor where you can end up having way too many plants of one type, even with max count enabled. Like if you have 10, but you have a max count weight factor of like, I don't know, 2, for example, you might end up breaking through the max count for some reason. I don't know why this happens. I don't know if there is an explanation for that happening. It's just really weird. which is why more often than not, I recommend just setting max count wave factor to 0 so that you don't have any issues whatsoever with this, or just leaving it blank. Leaving it blank and using max count works really well, and you should be without problem. What max count wave factor does is that it will take into account the max count that the player reaches of a plant. When the plant reaches that value, their weight will be multiplied by whatever factor you decide to include here. Let's say, for example, where Strawberries in this case has a weight of 100 and I reached a max count of 10 on the board. When this happens, their count will be multiplied by a factor of 2. In this case, the value of the weight of Strawberries will become 200, meaning I'm more likely to regain Strawberries in case I lose it during gameplay. That can be useful, but I've found more problems than not when using this feature. I recommend just skipping it. Either setting it to 0, like this, or leaving it blank. Max count cooldown. This is basically, like it says here, when the max count is reached, this plant will not appear on the conveyor belt until the cooldown ends. This is in seconds. Let's say I decide to add Time Warp into the level, and it has a really low weight of 75. Max count of 1, max count weight factor of 0. But I don't want the player to gain Time Warp super quickly, otherwise they will just keep using it to win the level. I just want them to use it as an instant plant that they have access to every couple of seconds. So I can just set up a max count cooldown of say 35 seconds, and my problem is solved. This means that after they get their first and only Time Warp, it will take 35 seconds for the next one to arrive. It is worth noting that this value here counts down in the background even if you haven't used the plant. So like I can hold on to Time Warp in my conveyor belt, and then at the 35-second mark I can use it on the board, and I will immediately gain it back in the conveyor belt because those 35 seconds have passed. And they will keep counting down as I keep using the plant. So that's something worth keeping in mind. You might either want to set this to be much higher, or you want to set up your max count to be different, or your weight. It really comes down to whatever you're doing in your level. And finally, max delivered just means that whatever value you set here, that's the maximum amount of plants that the player will get. Say for example, with squash, I'm only going to give the player 5 of them. What this means is that the player can use and obtain 5 squashes throughout the level, but once the max delivered count reaches 5, the player will not be able to get any more. Or you can set this to like a higher number, like 15 or something. Once it reaches that number, the player cannot gain any more squashes. That's it. The plan is just locked out completely. Just be careful using this with plans that might actually be that might die very often or very quickly in the level, especially like a main attacker. I recommend just keeping this off completely unless it's an instant plant, because if you set this for a primary attacker, the player might end up losing them too quickly and may not be able to rebuild their board. So be careful with that. And finally, boosted, you can just set up a plant to be automatically boosted over here by checking this check mark. And when you use the plant in a conveyor belt, it'll have its plant food effect. So if you want to make a Boosterama type level or something like that, you can do it with just a simple tick box here. Alright, last thing, not okay corral. Not okay corral is here in the conveyor section because, well, it's a conveyor level. You simply set this up, and then you set up a single plant to start with. You can set up multiple plants here in the conveyor belt for the first wave, and then the player will randomly be receiving them every wave. But for a not okay corral level, it's better to simply set up an event for each wave here. Set up a conveyor event through here, and then add the plant that the player has to receive during that wave for a not okay corral level, and that's it. And then you just keep doing this for every wave. So if you want to make a not okay corral level, check this down here. This is going to be the first plant that the player receives, and every subsequent wave you want to add them through conveyor events like this. Now then, I'm going to turn back on Seedbank over here because we're going to need it for these next ones down here. Well, except the last one, but we'll get to that later. Basebreakers. You can handle the Basebreaker minigame by simply checking this box here. It'll tell you that mowers are enabled. You want to have mowers and falling sun disabled, so simply turn them off like this. Remember, you have a checkbox for both of these. Simply turn these off. By default, they'll be like these. Turn them off. And you'll get to the Basebreaker here. Base locations, you'll get your little grid here. These are your bases. You can set up their locations however you want, like this. And as you can see down here, you'll get a little list here of the bases that you have, their contents, and whether you need more or need less to make sure that the minigame works. As you can see, I'll tell you an issue, and you need to make sure these values are exactly the same. Here you can set up the contents for the bases. You can set up the zombies and how many zombies of that type are in the bases. Say, for example, 3 of these bases will have wrath zombies, 1 of them will have a gargantuar, 2 of them will have basics, something like that. Here you can set up your plants, and collectibles, you can set them up over here. You can give the player regular sun worth 50, small sun worth 25, medium sun, which I believe is worth 50 as well, or less, maybe more, and large sun, which is worth way more, or you can give them plant food and the number as well. I recommend just clearing all of these defaults here, except for the raw. I put that there, and then creating your contents yourself through the list that are given here: the zombie list, the plant list, and the collectibles list, and then setting out the base locations over here. Very, very simple, very straightforward, and you can even set up the base type for whichever ones you want, and the number of plant bases in case you want some of these bases to be guaranteed to be plants. You need to have Seedbank enabled in case you have plants that you give the player over here. They need to be preset, I believe. If you want them to have, say, cherry bomb and potato mine, you need to have the Seedbank enabled. Otherwise, you can just disable it and just let the player work with the regular plants. That's totally fine as well. The minigames section, we get to the minigames. All of the various minigames here. First, sun bombs. Sun bombs, they will tell you that you may want to ban some producers like this by simply going up here and then banning some producers like so. Of course, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I recommend doing it. If you can just leave these values alone if you don't want to change how the sun bombs themselves work. But I'll guide you through each of them in case you do want to do that. Plant explosion radius, basically that's how much space the bomb covers with its damage. And plant explosion damage is, well, how much damage the bombs will do to the plants. The same goes here for the zombies. How big the radius for damaging zombies is, and how much damage it'll do to them when it explodes. Very simple. These values, you can just change them as much as you want. You can make it super big or super small. You can make it do a lot of damage or very little damage. It's really up to you. You can just leave this as defaults as well. That's totally fine, and then you'll be able to have a sun bomb level. Make sure that falling sun is enabled for this. Most of the time it'll be enabled by default, but if you don't have it enabled, enable it. so some monster works. Otherwise, nothing will drop from the sky, and some monsters will be redundant. Last stand. So, someone in the comment section in my last episode asked, not last episode actually, just a random video, asked me how last stand works. I explained it to them slowly. I'll explain it here very quickly. In this corner here, you can set up how much starting sun the player will have, say 5,000, how much plant food they will have, which is going to be, I don't know, 4 for example. And then, once you have these values set up, you want to go up here. If level objectives is not enabled, enable it. Otherwise, your level will not work. But that's it. That's how last stand works and how you set it up. Now we have these other two down here. Beghouled, if you click this, the level will be Beghouled. What this does is that it simply makes all the zombies invisible. You will still be able to hear their sound effects, but they won't be able to be seen visually. So if you want to make a minigame like that, you can do it. And plant columns, you can enable that like this. Obviously, you know the minigame from PvZ 1. And what this does is that all the plants that you place will be placed in columns. That's it. Worth noting in mind, you are only spending sun for the first and only plant that you place. All of the other copies in that column are completely free, so keep that in mind. Bowling line, this is for the bowling minigame. All this does is that it sets up the line or the limit from where you can place down your bowling balls. As you can see, it uses the X coordinate. If you're lost on how to set that up, go to initial and look up here. Let's say we want the bowling line to be right here on 3. So we simply set up 3 as the X line. And that'll set up the bowling line. What this means is that I can only place plants and bowling balls over here in this area, but not over here. And finally, Beghouled levels. So you can enable that here. It'll tell you if bowling sun is enabled. So go ahead and disable that. First things first, make sure that Seedbank is enabled. If this is not enabled, your game will crash. So make sure Seedbank is enabled if you're making a Beghouled level. You'll see matches to win. This sets up the objective to reach. Can swap plants, true or false. Always keep this on. You do not want to disable this, otherwise the level will just auto win itself. Plants on the Beghouled board, as you can see. This sets up the amount of plants that there will be on the board. You generally want to keep this at 4. 5 is the limit that you can reach without making the level way too complicated, otherwise there will be no matches to make. There's also a note here that says that repeating the same plant makes the plant appear more often. So it's similar to escalation, where the more instances of something there is, the more likely it is to appear. You can have 2 instances of pea shooter here, for example, and pea shooter will be more likely to appear compared to all the other plants here. That's really it. And then there's also some extra notes here that are worth keeping in mind in case you're making a Beghouled level. Then we have the Beghouled spawner for various stages. Up to 5 stages can be in a Beghouled level. We got the zombie list. This is the zombie list that you can set up here. This will be taken from here. So if you want to set up your zombies here first, you can do that. You can simply set them up like so. Pick whatever zombies you want and then go here. And then you'll be able to set them up like so. These are picked randomly, just like escalation. The more instances that a zombie appears in, the more likely they are to be spawned. Spawning delay is very important. This is in seconds how long it takes for a zombie to spawn in Beghouled. If we set this to something like 5, well, it'll take 5 seconds for a zombie to appear, and every 5 seconds they'll be appearing. How you set up the stages is very simple. Number of matches means that when the player reaches this amount of matches, say 35 for example, the zombie list will be changed to whatever it is that you want here. You can also change the spawning delay to be different per stage. You can do this up to 5 times. You can do this more if you decide to hand code, but Honestly, most of the time you'll just be doing like about 3 or 4 stages, maybe 5. The only tip I can give here is very important, is regarding the spawning delay and during the final stage of your level. Let's say for example my matches to win is 100 and I decide to set the final stage to start at 90 matches. If the spawning delay is either 1 second or lower, the level might actually soft lock, because zombies will constantly spawn and does not allow you to beat the level, which is why I recommend setting the spawning delay to be the lowest you can beat is about 2 seconds. Otherwise, you run the risk of the level soft locking, because zombies keep dying, but they keep spawning, so you're never able to grab the money back and actually beat the level. So try to make sure you deal with that, and be careful with that. Finally, the plan upgrades. You can set up any plan upgrades you want here. You first set up whichever plan you want to upgrade over here. Let's say Bok Choy, and then I set up the upgrade. Let's say I don't know, Wasabi Whip, and then I wanted to upgrade to I don't know, Potato Mine, and that's it. That's how you progress the tree here of plan upgrades. Like it says here, the costs are only edible in the OBB. There are some plants which are not supported in the Beghouled levels, or some that straight up break the game. I don't actually know the list. I'm pretty sure as of the current version of Reflourished, every plant is able to be played in Beghouled, except for Assault Airspace plants and Solar Beam. We simply forgot to make those compatible with Beghouled. But any other plant aside from those should be fine to use in Beghouled levels. So yeah, there's also the Beghouled upgrade charter down here. I'm not going to cover this. This is a lot more complex, so I won't be covering that here. Just probably stay away from that. Last but not least, the Zomboss Battles. Now, very, very, very important. Zomboss Battles here is not a custom Zomboss battle. That is very, very important to keep in mind. People think that by enabling this you can make custom Zombosses. That's not true. Making custom Zombosses is a completely different beast, and I'm going to leave a video that someone in the community made about how you can make custom Zombosses if you want to learn about that. I'm not going to cover that in this series though, because that's more advanced. But in case you do want to make a Zomboss level, you can do that here. You simply select the Zomboss mech that you want from the list. You can select multiple, but keep in mind that due to the way their hitboxes work, all of the Zomboss will actually try to kill each other. So don't do that. The arena bosses here, actually they're nowhere here, but in the vanilla list there are some arena Zomboss mechs. Those are unkillable. All of these here in the list are killable. You can destroy these. You can set up the number of phases here. If you want a really cool phase 4 theme, you can set it up to here, like just having 4 phases instead of 3. You can set up the number of reserve columns. This means these are the columns on the right, starting from the right, that will be reserved for Zomboss that you cannot plant in. I recommend just keeping this at 2. Death row determines where Zomboss will, well, quite honestly, kill himself. Death row and death column, that's precisely where Zomboss will land after to do his death animation. You can choose to show in the zombie preview, and same with the slide in like this. And it says here that there's a note. This ensures that for certain Zomboss, the other screen bit isn't revealed. So you can just use this if you want to make sure that things don't look janky. And down here is a section specifically for the Taskmaster. This is how you can set up the weights for the zombies that appear in, based on the on how far the glaciers spawn. And obviously, since they spawn from here, this is how much space the Taskmaster takes up. And from here to here is where the glaciers spawn. So you want to set them up like so. Let's say over here, it's more likely that Zomboss will only be spawning these guys, for example. And then the closer he gets to your house, he spawns more dangerous stuff or something like that. You can even set up some of these glaciers to be completely empty if you want. So that's very nice. That's pretty much all of the Zomboss battle part though. Worth noting, obviously, most Zomboss battles are conveyor belts. But doing this, you can actually create seed bank or choose your seeds Zomboss battles. So if you want to experiment with that, go ahead. I don't recommend it because most of the time, Zomboss battles can be very RNG dependent. If you want to do something like a choose your seed Zomboss, I recommend giving the player extra starting sound and plant food just to make sure they don't get instantly screwed over. But yeah, that's just me. Oh yeah, and there's also this part here, the camera pan, like it says here, it's just for the multi-stage masher. If you're using the Neon Mixer Tour Zombot, enable this. So that's it. Let's cover the final things here. 2 extra tabs here, which I didn't plan to cover originally at the start of this episode, but these are so brief that I might as well cover them in this episode, that being the summary chart or the point chart and the Codenames tab. The summary tab basically works as a general summary of the zombies and points used during a level. As you can see, up here you will see the point guide, the total points used, plant food, zombies from events, zombies from waves, and zombies from escalation. If we go here to the waves, you're going to see that obviously our 3 bases here have a point value. Like I said in the first episode, every zombie has a point value. If you decide to use points, such as like with a point guide or something, you can use a summary to keep track of how the waves generally are going and decide if they're to your liking. What the point guide generally does, again, like I said in the first episode, it's just a guide. You really shouldn't be using it as a set value for your levels, because as you can see, it's just a straight curve upwards, except for the waves, the flag waves, where there will be more points. Obviously, you generally want to keep it as, like it says, a guide, so that you don't run into issues. It also displays your how many plant food there is in a level. I really like this feature. I actually use the point chart exactly for the plant food showcases down here in the total plant food counter. Very useful just to keep track of that in case you get lost. Like it says up here, it also tracks zombies that spawn from escalation. So like let's say we set up an escalation of 200, then 100, and we set up some zombies here. The zombies from escalation will also be shown, and then you can gauge exactly when do the zombies start getting added from escalation, which is very useful as well. Finally, of course, it shows you the waves. If you want to match the amount of the point guide here, you can do that, or you can go up above or below it, like how it happened over here. As you can see, it has a point value of 7 for the point guide, but the zombie waves are 10, so that it goes above the point guide. You can also see down here the zombie count. You can see the total number of zombies used in the level and in which rows they were used in, as well as if they were used in random rows that will be displayed over here. And this is really great because this way you can check if there's some zombie that is being underused in your level. And if it is, you can try to remove it or add it more throughout the level, or replace it with something else, or more zombies so that the zombie isn't underused. And that's very useful. If you use points, you can use this up here, the chart, or this point distribution. The point distribution simply shows you where the points are being used the most during the waves in each row. As you can see here, you got the totals for each zombie here. For example, the armor 2, the bucket head here, 41 total use, gives you a sum, and the zombie counts are also shown down here in case you want to have that. But I generally don't use this. If you're someone new to Elm and are trying to use point guides, you're generally just going to be using the point chart up here. But like I said many times before, the point guide is simply that, just a guide that you can use to make balanced waves, but it won't really make interesting waves. So try to learn to work outside of the point chart because it's not going to be a foolproof solution to level design. And finally, the code names. Down here, you can go into the code names chart and you can look at any zombie code name and any plant code name, grid item code name, and condition code name. As well, it says here the how the points work. Airfield levels do not use point charts. That's precisely what I've been saying this entire series. It is just a guide, so use it as a guide, not as a tool or like as something that dictates how your level should go. There's also a little note here for some zombies, such as the zombie bolt. It tells you how to do stampedes. Or down here with the jetpack, how to do jetpack attacks. Generally, this is not as useful anymore because as of recording this episode, Elm hasn't been updated to keep up with the newest stuff in Reflourished. So there's going to be some missing stuff here. Like, for example, all the new stuff we added to Caligula's Carnival, that's going to be missing. Grid items and other stuff like that has been added since the 1.2.3 update. That's not going to be in here. Which is why we recommend you use the text file for the code names that's available in our Reflourished Discord server. Because that one is always updated every time an update comes out. Like if you try to find the Assault Airspace stuff down here, you're not going to find it. However, you can still use it if you go to your code names over here, your zombies present list, and you just type in the code name, such as for example the Sky City basic, and then you just type out the point value, and it's going to work just fine as long as you get the correct code name. So with that, we reached the level code screen, which of course I've already told you how it works. So that's going to wrap up the episode for now. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and found it useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to rewind through the episode and watch it again as many times as you need to gain the knowledge that you need. Or feel free to ask me a question in the comments and I would be more than glad to help you out. You can also, of course, always join the Discord server. The Reflourished Discord server is full of people who are willing to help you out in figuring out how level stuff works, including custom stuff, which, like I said before, I'm not going to cover in this series, but if you would like to get into that, the Reflourished Discord server is available there. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.